The little bow stitch, first cast on a multiple of 10 plus 7 stitches. That means if you're making a flat panel, you will cast on a multiple of 10 stitches and then you will add 7 at the end. If you're knitting it in the round, you will only cast on the multiple of 10. The instructions say to knit 1, then knit 5, then slip 5 stitches with the yarn in front. First we're going to knit the 5 stitches, and I am going to use the knit stitch. So I'll knit my 5 stitches. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then the instructions say slip 5 with yarn in front. What I do to slip the 5 is I take the stitch off the peg, I bring the yarn behind the peg but in front of the stitch, just like that, and then I replace the loop, the stitch back on the peg. Now I do the same with the next peg, take the stitch off, the working yarn behind the peg but in front of the knitting, again take it off behind the peg and replace the loop back on the peg, and that makes 1, 2, 3, and we need 2 more, 4 and 5, and then we need to repeat again, knit 5 and slip 5, and then we continue knitting the 5 and then we'll slip the next 5. In the next row you're supposed to knit back all the stitches, so simply turn back and knit all the stitches until you reach the end of the row. And when you reach the end of the row, you simply repeat the last 2 rows one more time. We says to knit 1, we're gonna just slip the stitch rather than knit it, and then we knit the 5 that we're supposed to do again. 1, 2, and 5, and then again we are going to slip the stitches. What we do is we take the stitch off the peg, pass it behind, and take the stitch off, pass it behind, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this part that we just did is the slip 5 with yarn in front of the knitting but behind the pegs. After we have completed the 2 rows one more time, we will again have an extra row to do with the slip 5 with yarn in front. So again you knit your first 5, and then of course time to slip, so we take above, and then we continue with the pattern, and it says to knit next 5. Just want you to see that now we have underneath the 3 strands that will become the bow stitch. So continue to the end of the row in the pattern as established, and in the next row we are going to gather the little strands and form the bow. So when you've reached the end of the row, you will come back and knit all the stitches, except we are going to stop in the middle stitch of the pegs where we did the slip 5, so we can gather the strands and form the little bow stitch. Okay, so we knitted 5, and right here is where we start the bow stitch, so we're going to do knit 2. Now we're going to stop for a little bit, take this stitch off the peg, hold it with your fingertips and reach in and bring the 3 strands to the front of the peg. So now you will have 1, 2, 3. Replace the stitch back on the peg. Lay your working yarn on top of the stitch. With your knitting tool, grab the 3 strands and the stitch. Hook your working yarn, make a loop, and take all the strands and the stitch that's on the peg off the peg, and put that loop that you were holding with your fingers on the peg. Tighten it to tighten the stitch, and continue knitting the next 2 and knit to the end of the row, and that forms a little bow stitch. And the little bow stitch will look something like this. It has the 3 strands, and that's the stitch where we gather the 3 strands to form the bow stitch. This sample was done with the knit stitch. You can see that the stitches are not twisted. In this sample, it was done with the single stitch, and there's a close-up of the little bow stitch. So as you can see, the little bow stitch can work with both the single stitch E-wrap or with the knit stitch. I hope you enjoy this little stitch and you can make many wonderful items with it.